Okay, so I've got a few more points done, but I haven't done anywhere near all of them. So I'm just going to select my surface so you can see the number I've done. And so you can see, still got a long way to go, but I've done enough to get the general slope of the site, particularly at the corners of each part of the site there. I've done a few points at least, and also going around the outermost points to make it as big an area as possible. And what I was just going to quickly show you then as well is that you can extend your surface using a really simple trick, and that is to copy the points. And so remember, you're not going to be building on this area over here, so it doesn't need to be perfectly accurate, but you want that to show quite often in some of your drawings, some of your views. So it's not a problem to copy those out as long as you follow the contours. Once you've got enough points to get a good general idea of the shape of those contour lines, then you can, copy the points out and try and just keep that general direction for the contours. So maybe that's a little bit low. I could always nudge those up, maybe get it to go in the right way, and I can extend it out in all directions in that way. Just make it nice and big. You want to have more rather than less usually, and you can even vary some of those points to make it look a little bit more realistic. Something like that. I'm just going to need a bit more room to work with than what the points will give me. So that's a good little trick, just to extend your surface out. So I'm just using Control here as I make my windows just to select multiple points. And then I'll maybe just extend it down a little bit. And then maybe continue across. Okay, so I've got a nice big topo surface there. And now I want to start dividing that up so that I can assign different materials to parts of it. So if you only want to divide it to do that, to give the surface different materials, then you should always use subregions. It's only when you need to set sudden changes in height that you should use split surface, really, because split surface will break the surface apart and basically create a new surface from the part that you split off, and it can be extremely useful. So if you're doing a waterfront site, for example, and you need to have a coastline that's a particular shape, and then say there's a shorefront there, or you have piles and it does drop down suddenly to the water level, you can do that with a split surface, or by splitting the surface, and then you can change the levels. Otherwise, I don't know if you've seen when you try to set say changes in your surface or your topography because of a retaining wall, and you often will have, you need to have points very close to each other, and you'll need often a series of very close points with one at say 2 meters and then another one next to it down at 0, so that it drops down suddenly, and that can be fairly fiddly. So in those situations, split surface can be useful, but otherwise, again, subregions are better, because subregions keep it as one surface. They're easy to remove if you decide to change your mind later, and then you're back to the original surface. So try to use subregions where you can, and I'll start with a subregion. I haven't saved the project for a while. I'll save it too. Okay, so I'm just going to make a subregion using my property boundary. So with pick lines, I can simply pick my property lines, hopefully using tab. There we go. And tick to finish in my 3D view. Now we can see the site much more clearly without even giving it a material. I'm going to go to a shaded view though, so you can see the colours. And I can of course select that surface within my overall topo surface and go into properties. Over here you can see, click on the browse button next to material, and we can have a quick look at materials while we're at it as well. So, how much have you done with materials? Have you made your own materials, or you've just been using materials that have been given to you? You've made some? Okay, so how have you been making materials? Copying, and then... Yep. Okay, that's all right, yep. So that's a good way actually, that's how I often do it, but it's good to know you can make materials from scratch. So you can see here there's a button at the top that looks like a rectangle divided up into panels. Click on that and it'll show you this little hidden part, which is actually the library for the complete Autodesk materials. So if you expand this here, you'll see Autodesk materials, and then if you go to maybe, let's say, metal or stone, and so here you've got complete materials, and by that I mean they've got both the graphics and the appearance done. The other way, you might have seen, if we go into it this way, just going to show you something similar so you don't get confused. So you're seeing this one, when you go into the asset browser, and you'll see materials that look like this. Have you been shown this one? No? Oh, okay. So you'll need this when you duplicate materials. So sometimes people think of this as the material library, because it is a library of materials, but the difference is this is just the appearance. So in other words, this is the render materials. The other one, that's all of the aspects. So the graphics and the appearance will come in with those. So the thing I suppose that is confusing for everyone at first with Revit is that idea of the materials having those two aspects. I'm going to go down to a material that I already have, Site Hardcore, and it's got, again, graphics and appearance. So the graphics, which I all know, is going to give you the shading colour, but also things like the patterns, the hatch patterns that'll be on the surface and when it's cut, that come up in your hidden line and your shaded views. But then the appearance tab gives you the materials you see when you render and in the realistic views and the ray trace views and so on. So there are those two sides to every material. And where it then gets really confusing is that the graphics is always unique to each material, but the appearance isn't. So this is why I always spend a bit of time on this. Do you know what that number means over there? Above the hand, the number 6? That means there are 6 other materials using this appearance. So if I just change Site Hardcore, if I go to the Appearance tab and make changes here, there are 6 other materials in that list that are going to be affected by that. So I'm going to show you the process I use quite often. I'll show you again maybe later on how you can make a new material from scratch using this option down here. But the method I'm going to use instead is to duplicate by right-clicking on the material. This is probably what you've been shown, and going to duplicate. And we're going to call this Site Grass. But then before I change anything in the appearance, I can change the graphics now, but I'll hold off, but I could change graphics if I wanted to, that'll be fine. But really important, before I change the appearance, notice how it says 7, because of Site Hardcore we know, and now Site Grass is another one that will be affected. So, to prevent other materials from being changed, you've got 2 options. You can either duplicate the appearance, just like duplicating the original material. If we duplicate this one, then it's unique. Or you can go to Replace. And Replace will bring up that asset browser that shows you the appearance library. And it's a really good thing actually. This is about as close as you get to the common material library that virtually all Autodesk programs use. So 3D Studio Max, AutoCAD, Navisworks, they all come with this standard Autodesk material library, which is good because that means the materials are consistent across all the programs. But to get to it, you've got to go in this way in Revit. So here you can see Appearance Library, and that's actually probably the best one to use. And so it's easy to remember because you're changing the appearance. So when you go in here and Replace, just remember to look for the Appearance Library over on the left, forget all these other physical ones for now. And then when you double click there, you'll see all these subfolders. There's a site work subfolder, which does have a lot of pre-made grass. So there we are, all these different types of grass. I'm going to go for St Augustine since I've never used that before. I'm going to double click. There we go. And now that's set as my appearance. Having looked at it, that's actually pretty terrible, so I'm going to change it. So again, right click, replace, and let's go for another one. I've got a feeling from what I saw next door that we've got some issues with the render module with Revit on these computers in here, so we'll have to get that sorted out. We don't have to render straight away, but oh no, it's updating. Here we go. No, that's better. So here, this has changed. Why hasn't this changed? It still says Bermuda. Oh no, I did go for Bermuda, didn't I? Oh no, it's using a noise. So it's actually working. It's using a what's called a procedural material and not an image. That's why it looks funny down here. Basically, that means it's using a set of values or a formula instead of an image to give the appearance of grass. So we'll say down here you've got some numbers that go in there, and that gives you this pattern, which can work pretty well actually for things like grass, but it's not what I'm looking for. I'm going to go back to replace and find one that has an image. I think this one does, grass stick. Yeah, that's better. So see how this one here, instead of using a set of numbers, it's got an image file, which I'll show you. Not this way, that's too slow. I'll show you this way. Is a photo of some grass. So you've got those different ways of making render materials. But often the photo-based ones maybe are going to work better for you if you haven't tried the others. Start with photo ones. And so that's just coming from the library, and that's all I need to do there. Now I'm going to go back to the graphics tab and just maybe quickly look at graphics options while I'm at it. This one here I find is really useful, just ticking use render appearance. But then after I've turned it on, I'll usually turn it off so I can then fine tune that colour. So you turn it on so that it picks up the colour from the appearance. It's basically averaging out the colour from that photo of the grass to give us that green colour. But if I don't untick it, then I can't change the colour anymore. So I've unticked it, now it's picked up the green, and I can click on that colour swatch and maybe make it a bit lighter or something and just fine tune it. So that's often the way I do it. And then we've got surface pattern. We don't need to have one here, but I'll just click on that so you can see the options. We'll definitely spend more on this later, but make sure you know you have drafting and model patterns. Do you know which ones you should use for surface patterns? Or the other one? 50-50? That's right, yeah, model. Model always. I don't even know why they give you the option for drafting. I think it's pointless. Because drafting patterns scale. In other words, if you change the scale of your view, they'll change size. And that doesn't make sense to me. If you've got it visible on the outside, think of it like a brick pattern. So a brick pattern is something you would see on the outside of your building, and that would be the size of a brick, each rectangle. With a drafting pattern, that's going to change size every time you change the scale of your plan or your elevation or whatever it is, which doesn't make sense. It's good for cut patterns because they're just symbols, but for representations, in other words, surface patterns, model patterns are going to work better because model patterns are one-to-one. They're a certain size and they remain that size regardless of your scale, which is a good thing. And notice how they're often pictures that you can recognise. That's the way to think of surface patterns and model patterns. They're usually going to be a picture of the material. But again, cut patterns are going to be symbol, so a symbolic representation. So in other words, here brickwork, you have the double lines that represent brick. It's not a drawing of a brick. And notice how here they were sensible and they don't let you use model patterns. It's just set to drafting. I think it's because some people really wanted to use some of the drafting patterns and didn't care about the scale. So wanted those visible on the surface, but I don't see the point of it. I've never used that option for a surface pattern in my life. I would just always set that to model. Again, we don't need to worry about the surface pattern, and then for the cut pattern, you can see there's one set. I'm going to click there, and do you know how to clear the pattern? If you don't want a pattern that's been assigned. Special button down the bottom, exactly. You've got that button for no pattern, which is really important because often you'd need to remove the pattern that's been assigned, and that's how you do it.
This is only for the surface, not all the earth.
Exactly, exactly. You'll never see that with a topo surface. It's got its own setting for the cut pattern anyway, which we'll look at later. But I'm still setting it up because I might use this material for other things. I'll probably make some floors that I give the grass material and that end up being cut. So I want the material to work for those too. Oh yeah, so the last thing I just wanted to say there, we've got the colour. Notice how you've got the colours for the surface pattern and the cut pattern. Just avoid touching those because they should normally be left black. This isn't the colour for the material, this is the colour for the patterns. And then we're just going to be black lines with the green or whatever colour you have for the shading filling the rest of the material. So that's your main colour. It's just that you won't see it. Okay, so I've assigned it, but you won't see it in some views like hidden line. So if you're wondering how it works, basically that shading colour comes up in shaded and consistent colours, and then realistic, again, we'll use the appearance. So that's our photo of the grass, and ray trace does as well. There we go. So don't be afraid of ray trace. It's actually a pretty good option sometimes, but you just need to be prepared to wait. So I'm going to go to realistic instead. Right, so now much more clear where my building is, and I can also maybe just fine-tune my my section box. And then just want to show you one last thing, and this is maybe going to make it a bit clearer why I've gone through that whole process of setting up the AutoCAD file, or linking the AutoCAD file in the way that I did. It's because I want to make another subregion now for the footpath. So I'm going to go back to subregion, and I'm going to use pick lines to get the edge of the curb here, and so I'm going to get the inner line there, and again using tab to get as much as I can. So there we go, that's got a good amount. Maybe over here I will clean that up a little bit, and then I'll go back and draw a line manually just to close off the shape and then trim that. So I'm ignoring that driveway for now, not really necessary. And so then I can obviously do these lines down the bottom in the same way, just by picking the lines that have come in from AutoCAD. And then, okay, so it finishes there, so I can extend that though. And then this is a really important part. Along the edge of the site, I can also pick the lines from AutoCAD. Now, if you haven't done it the way that I've just been showing you, if you've tried to do it all in Revit, and you've done subregions, and then you have another subregion that is touching the subregion that you've done previously, it won't snap to it when you go to draw the new points for a start. It's just one of those things that Revit doesn't do. But Revit won't let you have overlapping subregions. It's one of those annoying things. So you can't, it's very difficult to draw right up against an existing subregion, but you need to do that because if you go over even slightly, it just won't let you finish the subregion. And if you don't go right up against it, if you have a gap, then you're going to have a little sliver of the surface left over, and that's no good either.
So you're saying you're using that boundary line?
Yep.
That's the point of it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And because it's exact, it's coming from AutoCAD, then we can do the subregions touching each other without doing a lot of extra work like you would if you did it all with Revit. And so then, later we can apply the same principle when we work on the road, because the road will come next, it'll go next to the footpath, and I'm going to have a lot of subregions that are right up next to each other. And just having the AutoCAD lines there will make, everything much, much easier.
But we did that the boundary line using the DWG
Yeah.
line anyway. So even if we didn't do that, we could still pick it off there anyway.
Oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm not even picking it up the property line, I'm picking the AutoCAD lines.
Right, sorry.
We're in the same place, but yeah, I'm picking the AutoCAD lines. And, once I get past that, I'll do, like I said, next after the footpath, I'll do the road. And so then I've only got the AutoCAD lines to pick, but that's fine, I've got them. So, works really well. And so, a lot of these things that I do, at first might seem like a lot of extra work, but they're all things that I do to make life easier. I don't like doing work that I don't have to do. So here you can see I just drew this line at the end, almost in a random position, just so I could have something to join it to, because it's got to be closed off at the end. So you know this, and then over here at the same angle. I'm not going to worry about that that wall there. We can adjust it later. Just want to get this to a point where I can finish it and see if it will let me. And now here we go. Subregions again have to be closed, but at least there's one thing Revit's good with. It will show you, if you click on that show button, if you haven't noticed that before, when these errors come up, it will often be really helpful and zoom in to show where the problem is. And this is something AutoCAD is not as good at. So that's all horses for courses. And so that's my extra line that was causing the issue, I'd say. And if I try to finish it now, fingers crossed, there we are. Okay, so I'm going to, again, go to a shaded view. And now you can see here, we've got another problem. So it's lost my other subregion. I hope it's not because I deleted. This is something that will always happen. I'm going to undo. Okay, so I'm just going to save it at this point. And you just got to watch out for issues like this with subregions. So back to the site here, I'll just try it again. I might have gone over the you can't see why it would have had a problem with that though. So again, I'll just try one more time. Don't worry about this warning about the things being slightly off the angle. That's normal. Okay, so what you can do if this keeps happening is break the subregion up into smaller parts, but I don't want to have to do that. It's interesting, it's picking up different lines to what it did last time as well. Revit is a strange program in some situations. I'm hoping because I've drawn it slightly differently that this time it will not give me that error, but I have seen that error before. There we go. And I've been able to resolve it. There we are. Okay, so I've got the boundary now, hopefully in a workable state. And it's done it again. Yeah, so just one of those things you've got to work around. Okay, so as a little test, what I might do is put in the thing I was telling you to avoid. I'm just going to put a gap between these and see if that will fix it. So I'm just going to put maybe 10 mil, and if you turn the copy option off, you can move a line. So I'm just going to see. So here, by clicking on these lines on the property boundary, it's basically going to move them in 10 mil. I should get away with. Now that one went the wrong way, so I'm going to undo that and then just make sure it goes down. There we are. So let's see. That's better. So just got to watch out for that. It's that same issue. Just when subregions get close together, it causes all sorts of problems with Revit. And I wish they would make it better, but again, I think because with the commercial version you get all these extra site tools, they don't worry about it. But now at least I can give a different material, so I'm just going to select this and just more quickly repeat the process I just did with the materials. So I'm going to click on the browse button there. There's my site grass material. I'll just use that one. So right click, duplicate. So site pavement or footpath, sidewalk if you're in America, I suppose. And then if you again go straight to the appearance tab, the number 1 there, just to remind you, is telling me that the site grass material is using the same appearance. So I'm going to go to replace, go to the appearance library, concrete, and just find one of these concrete materials that I like the colour of. Hopefully one that's not too complicated, because we don't really need a lot of realism in this material. So I've got this material that's using an image. That's even overkill for me. I don't need that, so I'm going to click on the little down arrow next to the image slot and just remove image. So it's just a plain material, but notice there's a bit of texture there. You know why that happens? If I remove the image from the appearance, there's a texture. So that should tell you there's still a texture in there. So if you go down further, you'll see there are other sections, and the bump is giving us that texture. So if we expand it, you can see why it's using an image as well. So I could either remove the image, or I can just untick bump. So that's just now a flat surface, renders faster, works faster generally, and I can change the colour. I want it to be a bit darker. Here we are. Then I'm going to go and on graphics, same as before, tick use render appearance, then turn it off and maybe fine tune that colour a little bit more. That's it. No, I'll leave the patterns for now, so that's it. I'm going to click OK, and now you can see it's a different colour. Okay, so it's a pretty standard process you can use to divide your site up and just make things more recognisable, particularly in the 3D views. And just one little tip that I can give you there as well, when you're doing your site drawings, what I was thinking of doing with you over the next few weeks as you're preparing for your design is looking at approaches to starting your design, like a site analysis drawing. Have you done one of those before? Oh, you have? Good, good, great. Okay, so we'll start doing a site analysis drawing in class, but what I see a lot of people doing is try to do it all in Revit and do all this shading and everything, and so you end up with so many topo surfaces it's not funny, and then you never need them again later on when you're doing the more complicated things. That setup isn't going to work anyway. So I'll show you some other ways of doing it instead of just using subregions for everything, but yeah, get a few in for the main things like the roads especially would be good. And then maybe just going back to the satellite view, if I set this to wireframe, just be prepared to do something for the buildings. So notice how we've got all the buildings here. Maybe if you're not sure about using AutoCAD, it's not a good idea to draw those up straight away, because I want to show you a couple of tricks that you can use with AutoCAD to again help you with Revit, because you can do outlines of those and then we can quickly model up some block forms in Revit for those. But just be prepared for that. So if you are going to do a lot of subregions, just make sure you allow room for the buildings, and that should be plenty for you to go on with. So have a look at those things. And what else was I going to mention? Oh yeah, building pads we'll do later. Have you used building pads to do your excavation? Yeah. And parking components and site features, those things you've probably looked at as well. So they'll be the next things. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll definitely look at those, but once we've got the footprint established, I suppose. So unless there's anything else about the site, I think that should be plenty for you to go on with.